if you are hitting 30 sets per muscle group per week, I can guarantee you that your body is not going to be recovering over a long period of time. What's going on, guys? Ryan from Results-Based Therapy here. Today, we are going to be going through a protocol on how to gain the most amount of muscle possible. To do that, we are going to be going through a systematic review, a research article, and it is titled Maximizing Muscle Hypertrophy, a systematic review of advanced resistance training techniques and methods. Now, this is from 2019, and it included 30 studies in its collection, and it reviewed the best possible training techniques in order to gain the most amount of muscle possible. Now, first things first, we need to assume a few things. We need to assume that you are in a calorie surplus. You're giving your body enough nutrients to build. You are getting enough rest. You're getting enough sleep. Sleep is really important and could probably be a whole nother video entirely. And number 3 is that your training techniques or methods are suitable, or you are doing the correct form for that exercise. So they're sort of our 3 provisos that we must hit. Now, the research is very vast in regards to what is actually required to gain muscle size. Things like sets from 10 to 30 sets per muscle group per week have been shown to be effective. Big range. Likewise, hitting anywhere from 30 to 80% of your 1RM for the exercise in particular. Now, these are large varieties of numbers, and basically what it means is that if you're training at a sufficient level, you can pretty much gain muscle size with anything that you do in the gym that is somewhat hard. Now, we're going to delve a little bit more deeply and actually determine what the optimal things are that you can do in order to gain the most amount of muscle size. So, first things first, we need to assume that you're going to be getting your mechanical tension and you're going to be getting metabolic stress from your training. To do that, we need to be hitting around 3 to 4 reps in reserve per exercise. And what that means is that, say for example, if you're doing a bench press, and you get 10 repetitions out for that exercise at a particular weight, let's just say it's 100 kilos, you should feel like you could have got 13 to 14 reps for that 10 reps that you did. Now, in the literature, that is what this systematic review says. You need to be hitting about 3 to 4 reps in reserve for each exercise. It is not required to be pushing the muscle to absolute fatigue, although that is a training method that you can do on occasion to stimulate more metabolic stress, more mechanical tension, and that's generally an advanced technique. So that's what I have to say about that. So that is called volitional fatigue, and is basically how many reps can you do whilst maintaining a certain reps in reserve. So that's the key factor with that one. The protein synthesis needs to occur when we have got enough metabolic stress in the system. And to induce metabolic stress, we need to be hitting a certain volume mark. So to be hitting that volume mark, and we said before, anywhere from 10 to 30 sets per muscle group per week has been shown to be effective. Now, interestingly, there is a dose-dependent relationship between volume and muscle size, meaning the more volume we do, the more muscle size we get. So that is an interesting factor nonetheless. However, if you are hitting 30 sets per muscle group per week, I can guarantee you that your body is not going to be recovering over a long period of time. And it is not only going to be inducing a injury of some kind over an extended period of time, your body just won't be able to handle that kind of stress. You will sleep poorly. Remember what we were saying before, we need to sleep well to be able to gain muscle size. And so that is a very high amount of sets per week to be hitting for the natural individual who isn't enhancing themselves.
The answer is no. I've never taken steroids.
Or, just going to the gym sort of 3-4 days a week. That is a lot of sets. So basically what we've sort of found in here is that, you can do up to that 30 sets per muscle group per week, but we need to have periods of deload. Deload is really important for giving your body time to rest and recover and to actually build itself back up. So what we were saying before with the protein synthesis, we need to allow the body time to recover in between sessions, and a deload is a really good way to do that. So, and a deload might look like, for example, you're doing 25 sets per muscle group per week. You might dial that right back to doing 10 sets per muscle group per week, and then reducing volume, kilos lifted throughout the session, and also intensity is another variable that you can sort of play around with. And intensity means how close you're taking yourself to that 1RM. So say, for example, your bench press is 100 kilos, that's your maximum weight. And normally you would lift 80% of your 1RM, so 80 kilos. You might do for your deload maybe 60 kilos, so 60% of your 1RM, which would allow your central nervous system time to rest in between. So interesting. There's a few methods that you can use to stimulate recovery. Again, that is probably a whole nother video, but particularly what we are talking about is techniques to gain muscle size. And so volume is one of, if not the most important factor to play with when we're trying to gain the most amount of muscle size. So really, we're assuming you're hitting your 3 to 4 reps in reserve, occasionally taking the muscle to absolute fatigue, and you are hitting anywhere from 10 to 30 sets per muscle group per week. That is the formula to gain muscle size. So there is some advanced training techniques in order to get more volume per week in a more suitable or more time efficient manner. And that is through doing things like what we call supersets, where you might do a agonist-antagonist pair. So that usually includes doing a push with a pull, or say, for example, if you're training legs, you might train your quadriceps and then the opposing muscle, the hamstring. And that's a good way to get a lot of volume in the session for a very short amount of time. And so that is one technique that I have used with my own training for many, many years. And I would say that I have trained like that probably for 10 plus years in that manner. And it's a really good way just to get the most bang for your buck out of your session. I find that, 45 minutes goes by for me in the gym, and I'm probably going to be able to hit 3 to 4 supersets in that 45 minutes with shorter rest. So that's another variable that we can talk about, is that usually when we're trying to gain metabolic stress through the system, we're talking about short rest. And short rest is usually around that 60-second mark, which is what it says in the systematic review right here. So short rest, supersets. We've also got things like drop sets, which are methods basically where you'll do a certain weight and then you will work the muscle to absolute fatigue, and then you will drop the weight, say 20%, and do as many reps as you can on that. And then you might drop it one more time, another 20%, and you would do as many as you can on that set. So that's another method that you can use to increase total volume for the session. Remember, we're trying to hit more volume and trying to keep some reps in reserve or work the muscle to fatigue on occasions. So these training techniques are basically just aimed at trying to increase that sort of, that volume mark that we need to hit. So really, throughout the study, we sort of see that they keep coming back to volume, to rest times, increasing metabolic stress. It mentions here that sort of your beginner level is sometimes training that 6 to 10 sets per muscle group per week. And then your trained individual is hitting that around 28 sets per muscle group per week. What I would recommend, being a physiotherapist and seeing people who injure themselves on a frequent basis when their training load exceeds their body's capabilities, is starting somewhere around where you're quite comfortable. So this might mean that somebody who's an intermediate trainer, they've trained for a few years, they might start at 12 sets, and then the following week, they'll increase their sets by 1. So they'll do 13 sets per muscle group per week. And then the following week, they'll do 14, then 15. And usually what we're seeing with training, in my experience, is that you like to do a deload, particularly if you're training really, really hard, every 5 weeks to 6 weeks. That's what I've done in my training. And that's what I'm often recommending people. You can do more, you can do less, depending on how intense your training is, depending on what kind of block you're going through. But that's what I've done when I've particularly focused on muscle hypertrophy, because it is a type of training that does induce quite a lot of stress because of the total volume you're lifting. You do need to be really switched on when it comes to resting your body after the session. So that's really important to sort of take into consideration. What we're also seeing here is that, what I mentioned before is that people are hitting anywhere from 30 to 80% of their 1RM, which in equivalent terms, we're talking about, people hitting from 5 repetitions per working set to 30 repetitions, or sometimes 40, 50 repetitions per working set. And so really the takeaway there is that it doesn't really matter how many reps you do, just as long as you take the muscle to fatigue or close to fatigue, remembering that 3 to 4 reps in reserve. That's there's a large variety. I mean, you'll talk to so many people in the gym and they'll say, oh yeah, you need to hit, 8 to 12 reps in the gym to be able to gain muscle size. In reality, it's probably not true. It's always good to give yourself a little bit of a guideline to work from. So, I mean, usually anywhere from 5 to 15 reps is a normal amount, or 5 to 12 even. But yeah, you can push yourself to more. I remember sometime in my training, going back 3-4 years ago, when I was doing deadlifts, for example, I would do what's called a pyramid set, where I would go, I would do like a 5, 9, 12, and then come back down through the pyramid. So then you would go 5, 9, 12, and then you would go 9, 5 down the bottom. And then at the end, when you've got to your point where you're lifting your 5 reps, which is quite a heavy weight, I would then do what's called a back down set, where I would put on something that I could get 10 to 15 reps out and then try to push it to fatigue. So, back when I was doing deadlifts, pretty heavy, I was doing 180 kilos for 10 reps on a back down set. And that was just to stimulate the most amount of metabolic stress in my system. So, and that's something that worked pretty well for me. And then obviously you would need to take time to recover. Back DOMs were very severe after doing something like that. So I'm generally not lifting again like that for another 3 to 4 days. That's generally how long it took to recover from a session like that. And so, yeah, that's what I used to do with my training. So, yeah, I mean, really, there's a lot of variability. I mean, we can play around with doing eccentric loads as well. So counting to 4 seconds, for example, on a decline would be a good way to do a eccentric contraction. And that is more around trying to build mechanical tension in the lift. So you might do a squat, for example, where you do a 4-second decline on the way down. 4 seconds is longer than what you think going on the way down on a squat, especially if you've got it loaded up pretty high. And then trying to go up at your regular rate, 1 to 2 seconds, and then 4 seconds down again. And that would be a way to increase mechanical tension through your lift, which is another variable for gaining muscle size, mechanical tension, metabolic stress. And that's a training technique that you could do in order to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So, yeah, I mean, there is quite a few different techniques that you can use. I've used cluster sets before where you are doing, say you'll do 2 reps, then you'll have a 20-second rest, another 2 reps, 20-second rest, another 2 reps, 20-second rest. And you might do that for 5 minutes, for example. And that's a really good way to get a high load or a high weight over a shorter amount of time, because it's more efficient. You've lifted more weight over a shorter amount of time. So yeah, if you're time poor, cluster sets, supersets, drop sets are really good. Eccentric loading tends to take a little bit more time because it's more time under tension. But it's a technique that you can use in your training at some point if you've got a little bit more time. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll finish it off. I'll read the summary from the actual study, and I feel like it does summarize it quite well. So it says, in summary, foundations for individuals seeking to maximize muscle growth should be hypertrophy oriented, consisting of multiple sets, 3 to 6, of 6 to 12 repetitions with short rest, 60 seconds, with a moderate intensity effort of around 60 to 80% of your 1RM, with subsequent increases in training volume, 12 to 28 sets per muscle group per week. So basically what they're saying is that per exercise, you will do 3 to 6 sets for 6 to 12 repetitions with 60 seconds rest at a moderate intensity, 60 to 80% of your 1RM, and then slowly increasing training volume from 12 to 28 sets per muscle group per week. So that's a really nice summary there. Really, as I said before, we are looking for 2 things. We are looking for increased volume, and we are looking that you are training the muscle to fatigue or close to fatigue, that 3 to 4 reps in reserve. They are the 2 main things that we are looking for to gain muscle hypertrophy. I know there's nothing sexy, there's nothing, new age. It's just simply getting in and getting the work done. But I mean, consistency pays off when we're talking about being able to do 28 sets per muscle group per week. You need to be going fairly frequently because there's no way that you're going to be doing 28 sets per muscle group per week in one session. And so that usually that would be split up over 2 sessions for the muscle group per week. A split that I used to do was a chest and biceps on a Monday. I used to do legs on a Tuesday. Wednesday would be back and tries. Thursday would be shoulders. Friday would be chest and back. Saturday would be legs again. And then Sunday was purely my rest day. And I used to use that as a cheat day as well, where I'd have like 2 pizzas and then go to Baskins and Robbins and get 4 scoops of ice cream. Not necessarily something I recommend for overall health, but to get calories in, that's what I was doing at that point in time. And yeah, that was my training split. And it definitely, I was sort of sitting around that 90 kilo mark, I suppose. Maybe 8 to 9% body fat. Did do a cut, actually. That was pretty interesting to see what the body could get to. I was 83 kilos on the day, and I estimated probably around 7% body fat. But yeah, back in another life. And yeah, so that is really the summary from the study today. So volume, taking your body to fatigue, make sure you eat enough protein, 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. That's the outcome that you should at least hit. And then being able to induce metabolic stress and mechanical tension through your training. As long as you are doing that, you are going to gain size, assuming that you're in a calorie surplus and you're resting enough and that your technique is good enough that you don't get injured and break down and then can't train. So they're the key summary points from today. And yeah, we hope to see you in the next video where we'll go through all things weight loss, injury prevention, human optimization, you name it, we're going to go through it if it relates to health. So look forward to seeing you in the next one.